Hey there, in this video I'm going to show you why I'm convinced that traditional language learning makes no sense and what you should rather do when you start learning a new language in order to see faster success. My name is Stefan and I've studied 13 languages, and naturally I became aware of different patterns across all these different languages and commonalities that enabled me to just be a little bit faster than your average person when it comes to language acquisition. So let's look at the traditional language learning way. If you start learning a new language, you will immediately become aware of the levels that there are. And these are typically clustered by A1, A2, then comes B1, B2, C1, C2. So A1 is basically the starter level where you're a total beginner, and then C2 is basically a language learning mastery, if you will. Okay, so once you start learning A1, A2 vocabulary and material, what you will realize is that there's a lot of useless vocabulary. Words like, the different family members or like fruits and these kind of things. And it always makes me laugh because I'm thinking like, so I'm German and I don't even know the whole family words in German. Neither have I ever been in a situation where it was critical to use them. And the same accounts for, let's say, specific food, like fruit that maybe you're using like once every half a year or whatnot, But unless you're living in that specific country, either way, you won't need them. And it's just words that don't pop up in a natural conversation that you would have otherwise. And therefore, I think it's a nice to have, but it's definitely not on my priority list at all when I start learning a new language. It's useless, right? And in the case of needing that specific word, I can always just, pull up a dictionary on my phone and just look it up and, problem solved. But I don't want to waste brain capacity when I get, started learning a new language for this kind of vocabulary. So that's why I've always had like a little bit of an issue or like clinch, with these kind of A1, A2 levels and so forth. It gets a lot better when you're at like B1 level, because then actually there's like a lot of useful vocabulary and things that get used in everyday life. But before that, I'm always kind of like, I don't know. Okay. So here's what I have always done instead and what has helped me to, improve a lot quicker. I've always looked at languages as a system, right? And as any system, there's like a specific rule set under which that system operates in. Once you understand rules, you have a better understanding of how to navigate yourself in that system. So for languages, grammar is basically the system. The grammar of that specific language defines the rule set under which it operates, under which basically you interact, articulate yourself, and phrases are basically formed. So what I always do when I start learning a language is just kind of read through a couple pages of the grammar in order to get a better understanding, like, okay, this specific language, how does it operate for verbs, right? Like, is it, for example, like Turkish, where basically it just becomes one long verb where you have the negation put in and all the different times and whatnot, you just edit so that it becomes this one big word? Or is it something where it's just like kind of separated and totally different, like let's say in Spanish? Okay, so this is the first thing that I do to get like a basic glimpse of better understanding how the system per se works. And I don't mean that I need to understand everything. Like I'm definitely not gonna understand everything of that new language that I'm learning, but just to get a better feeling, so to speak, like a better intuition for the system, right? So that's what I do first. And then what I always do is that I start learning the basic verbs. And with basic verbs, I mean like the 30 to 50 most frequently used verbs. Now, why is that? If you look at it from a fundamental perspective, then what are verbs? Verbs are basically indicating the movement. They tell you what is happening in a specific situation And once you are able to understand verbs, you're also going to be able to understand a lot better what people are talking about, what happens in a specific situation. They serve as orientation for your brain to kind of catch it and, kind of to fixate your brain on that verb. And then when you kind of understand, like, maybe this is, this was this verb, so probably, it's talking about that they're going somewhere. Let's say you understand the verb go, right? So you're kind of like, okay, they're probably going somewhere. So you already have something that allows your brain to kind of, get fixated to that and kind of focus on that. And that makes it a lot easier for your brain to then kind of pick up other things. Because when you start learning a language, of course, you're never going to understand everything, right? There's always like this kind of training your muscle of kind of trying to keep up of what is happening and follow it. But if you focus on the verbs first and foremost, then it will be a lot easier for you to progress from there. And how can you find the 30 to 50 most used verbs? Pretty easy. Basically, you just Google it, right? And there's like a ton of lists where you will find specifically these verbs lists. And it doesn't matter if it's like, really like the 30 most used or 40 most used. You can do whatever there basically. It's just about, kind of following that pathway, which will make things progress a lot more easier. Now, after having learned the verbs, and, in the beginning, I just learned the infinitive, so the basic form of the verbs, I will then also pick up different verbs different other words that are used as well with a high frequency, right? So these are, for example, like 100, 200, 300 different nouns that are words that are just being used in a lot of everyday conversations and other useful conversations. So, for example, these would be nouns like world, like people, like society, like things that kind of oftentimes describe a concept or just in everyday life are used a lot of times. And here, of course, like I have my own list that I've just kind of realized over the years that are just words that are being used a lot of times in all the different languages. But just by having that as a, kind of idea, like a form of orientation for your own language learning journey, it will naturally become a lot easier for you to just kind of watch out for these words, nouns specifically, and also think of like, okay, what are like different words that you're using a lot in your mother tongue, okay? And then what I will add is a couple adjectives, so things like big, small, expensive, cheap, these kind of adjectives that are also used with high frequency. And here I'm just going to add like the 20 most used adjectives, right? And this will already give me a great basis. And now the only thing that is missing is what I just, to not have to, in order to not have to kind of dive deeper into the kind of grammatical structures here and keep it top level, I just call them kind of connection words. And what I mean by that is different words that describe a connection or relationship between different words. So these are words like because, therefore. These can be things like why, like things that, or maybe like why is a bad example. So because of, that's why, So these can be words like because of, therefore, meanwhile, after that. So as you can tell, they just describe the relationship of different words with each other, right? And why is this so important? First off, because they're also used a lot. And secondly, because then your brain will be able to, slowly but steadily be able to understand the relationship of the words that are being used, right? So first off, you understand the movement, and then you understand what is kind of moving, like, or what is happening with the nouns that you're learning. Then you're also understanding like their kind of attributes, if you will, like expensive, slow, fast, cheap, these kind of things. And then lastly, you will understand what the relationship is kind of logic wise, right? Is if there's like a certain reasoning, or if there's like a time relationship before or after that, these kind of things. And this, in my experience, is a lot more useful and effective than just sticking to the traditional language learning path, which is like, okay, first off the A1 vocabulary, then the A2, and then so forth, right? Because it's not how, it's not what you would use in everyday life or like in interesting conversations, okay? And this has been working very well for me for all these different languages that I've studied. And I would highly encourage you to try it out, because it just saves you a lot of time and it enables you to prioritize things a lot better. So hopefully this was useful to you. Let me know in the comment section. So yeah, hopefully this was useful to you, and I was able to kind of give you a different outlook on how you could approach the language learning journey that you're just starting.